All right, now let's dive into one of the most popular travel logistics questions out there, and that is how to find cheap flights. And rightfully so, this is a very important subject because an international flight can literally make or break your entire travel budget. As we talked about in the previous credit card video, if you happen to score one of these sign-up bonuses for a free flight, that can take a huge chunk out of your costs. But you can't rely on those free flights every time. So with that, let's jump into how you can find the cheapest or best flight possible for you. You just have to be willing to do some research to find it. And I'll go through my entire process from start to finish on how I find the best possible flight. But first, a few things you need to be aware of. Number one, don't get scared off simply because of the sticker price. Airlines are constantly price testing, so prices can fluctuate on a daily or even hourly basis. Number two is day and time, and there is a big debate in the industry about what works best, what time, what day you should fly, what day you should book. But there are some things that you can follow systematically, and that is late at night or early in the morning are always going to be the cheapest flights. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are always the cheapest days, and Sundays are the most expensive days to fly. For US domestic flights, book from 3 weeks to 3 months before your flight. If you book before or after that window, you will pay more on average. For international flights, you should book further in advance for the best prices. I start monitoring flights if I know in advance at about the 6-month window, and then I'll book usually about 90 days in advance. Even if you buy in the prime booking window, prices still fluctuate on average every 4.5 days or so. You can use a bunch of different apps and tools to find out if you should wait or book your flight now. If you're looking at a fare and suddenly you go to buy it and it says the price is higher, come back in a day or two. Oftentimes the prices will drop back down later. And lastly, always be aware of holiday rushes. Christmas is obvious, Thanksgiving in the US, Carnival in South America, Victory Day in Eastern Europe, Ramadan, royal weddings, whatever it may be. Just be aware of holidays and special events and things going on that will essentially raise the prices on tickets. Third, after day and time, is understanding your hub airports. And these are the big, highly trafficked airports in different countries and regions that allow you to get the cheapest flights in and out of. For example, I'm currently based in San Diego, but my closest hub airport would be LAX. So if I'm looking for international flights from San Diego to Tokyo, oftentimes they're going to be much more expensive than from LAX to Tokyo or San Francisco to Tokyo. So with that, I'll look at prices from San Diego to LAX, or I'll get a ride, I'll drive, I'll take the train, other cheaper methods versus me trying to fly out internationally from my home hub. You want to find out what the big hub airports are. And speaking of that, number 4 is setting up your own manual itinerary. So as I mentioned with the trip from, let's say, San Diego to Tokyo, that's going to be very expensive because San Diego is essentially a small airport. So if I look at flights from San Francisco or LA to Tokyo, then I can worry about buying a separate ticket from San Diego to LA or San Diego to San Francisco, usually saving me a lot of money. Just be aware the downsides of setting up your own manual itinerary include the fact that if there's delays on any end, the airline won't compensate or won't recognize the fact that you're coming from different places. So let's say you get in late from San Diego to LAX and you miss your connecting flight, that's not on them. So be aware, make sure you have lots of padding in between those flights if you're setting up different pieces on your own. The other negative side of this, or something to be aware of, if you do book individual tickets, you will need to collect your baggage at each checkpoint, each separation of your ticket, and then go through security again. But if you plan ahead, you can literally save hundreds of dollars doing it this way. For example, when we talked about passports and visas, when I mentioned I buy a one-way flight somewhere and then I buy a cheap flight out and then don't take that flight, this is part of that. Setting up your own manual itinerary will save you a bunch of money, and you go through hub airports. And the 5th thing to consider when finding a cheap flight is understanding your own value. This is a tough one. People will often find cheaper flights with an extra layover, and the flight maybe is only $50 cheaper. What I like to do is understand the time that I'm spending in the air, the time that I'm spending on layovers, And let's say, for example, I have 8-hour layover in London. How much money am I going to spend on food? At least $20. So you got to take your time into consideration. So sometimes it could be a little more expensive, but it's worthwhile. So understand your value. Whereas when I first started out and I was backpacking and had $0 to my name, I would take that flight with 3 layovers if it meant I saved $200 to $300, because that could get me a long way in the places I was going. So just be considerate of yourself. And number 6 is learning your discount airlines. And these airlines often don't appear on comparison site pricing. So for domestic flights especially, make sure you understand what the possibilities are for domestic discount airlines. And for that, all you need to do is Google search discount airline Japan, discount airline Brazil, and you'll find a list of different airlines. Then you'll go to that site directly and find out the best price for you for your ticket. For example, Spirit Airlines in the US, EasyJet and Ryanair in Europe, and Tiger Airlines in Southeast Asia. And as always, I'll leave a ton of different discount airline information in the resources document. And number 7, the final thing I want you to consider when doing your research for your cheap flights is signing up for flight tracking programs. So this is websites and apps that allow you to track specific flights and destinations, or you can open it up to have them send you any flight deals from anywhere around the world. I like to set them up from my hub airports, and then I track flights and places I want to go from there, and I get email alerts when prices drop below a certain amount. So that's number 7. Those are 7 things to keep in mind when you're tracking your cheap flights. Now, let's jump into exactly how I go through step by step and find my cheap flights.